Hey, folks, it's Rick Wilson. Welcome back to Lincoln Square. I am delighted to be joined today by Julie K. Brown. In this moment where we are studying Jeffrey Epstein's um, uh, revelations that are going to be coming out, I am delighted to be joined by someone who knows this story better than anybody. She broke a lot of the initial Epstein reporting at the Miami Herald. It's Julie K. Brown. Julie, I want to thank you for coming on the show today. I know you are swamped. Julie's book, Perversion of Justice, is one of the seminal texts of this entire horrifying scandal. And Julie, as somebody who's now been reporting on this for what seems like a full decade, I guess it almost is at this point, more at this point. What were your feelings this week when this bill finally passed the House to have the Justice Department to mandate that they turn over the Epstein-related materials that they're holding on to?
You know, it's a mix of emotions. I've been living this story for so long and have had so many dealings with the victims and survivors of this crime that, you just as a person that has spoken to them so frequently, you feel sadness that it had to, that it had to come this long, that it took this long, that they've had to,
Right.
every time these women speak, they relive their horror all over again. And yet
Right.
they have had to do this now for many years, at least since my series appeared in 2018.
Right.
So for me personally, part of me feels glad that it's finally, the people are finally taking this seriously.
Right.
Um, on the other hand, as I said, it's depressing that it's taken this long for our government to do something about it.
I think that as I've talked to some of the victims recently and gotten to know a few of them, it is that sense that they were just abandoned by the government and by everybody for a very long time. And you chronicled this story, like as I said, from the beginnings of the state crime. And I've noticed one thing that as this has been evolving in the MAGA side of the press, you've been able to blow the whistle a few times on the allegation or the assertions they've made, like, oh, Donald Trump and Epstein barely knew each other, and he threw him out. It was all over. You've made that point a number of times. What have you seen coming from the MAGA right as this story has evolved into more of a panic for them, that you think is the most pernicious part of their spin here?
Well, they it's aggravating both sides, really, the Democrats and the Republican. What's aggravating it is they're using it as a political tool,
Yeah,
in some cases for their own ambitions to further their own careers, and that
sure.
is infuriating. I think that they should be honest about this. Look, Jeffrey Epstein did not discriminate based on political party. He gave plenty of money to both parties,
Right.
and there are plenty of people, if you go through his black book and his plain logs and everything else, there are plenty of Republicans on there. And I think one of the things that the Republicans were doing when they were talking about this bill yesterday before the vote that is kind of aggravating is they're trying to say, oh, the Democrats are all over this, or oh, the Democrats had this had this under the Biden administration. They never released it. I mean, that's particularly galling because let's face it, they prosecuted his accomplice successfully
Yep.
prosecuted Ghislaine Maxwell, and then she appealed. And you cannot open a criminal case file when it's under appeal
Right.
because a court is still considering her appeal. And so, you're almost giving her carte blanche to look at your files and then find a reason to have the charges thrown out. So
Hmm.
it's absurd that there are presumably some of these lawmakers have law degrees and have been prosecutors. You would think that they would know this, but they keep putting that misinformation out there. So that's some of the uh, things that come to mind. Yesterday that I heard.
We had heard before the vote happened in the House that there was a possibility between 50 and 100 defections. At the end, it was everybody in the House except one guy, Clay Higgins, who, whatever his weirdness is. Um, but were you shocked that how quickly it fell apart for the sort of stonewalling effort?
let me tell you why I wasn't shocked. I saw the video, the PSA that the victims put out over the
Right.
weekend, and when I saw actually, I might even get choked up about it as I'm talking about
I
it
know.
because I know some of those victims. A couple of them I interviewed for my series way back when, and
Mhm.
uh, I saw on a lot of social media people were saying, "Well, why don't they show the pictures of themselves when they were young?" And this PSA, they all are standing there holding their young
Yeah.
selves, and it is so chilling and emotional to watch that PSA. I thought the moment that I saw it, I thought there's no Republican that could vote against this. Of course, there was one,
Right.
but uh, I really felt like as soon as that PSA came out,
It
they were going to
it really hit. It really hit with a kick. Let's play that. Let's bring that up a video and play that quickly.
I was 14 years old. I was 16 years old.
I was 16.
17, 14 years old. This is me.
This was me.
This is me when I met Jeffrey Epstein.
This is me when I met Jeffrey Epstein.
There are about 1,000 of us.
It's time to bring the secrets out of the shadows. It's time to shine a light into the darkness.
Whew.
I know.
You watch that, and again, it's that as you wrote about years ago. That first state case only had a handful of the victims of Epstein. And that's another lie that you busted the other day. Someone said, "Oh, Trump reported Epstein in the first case." You're like, no, it was one of the parents of one of the
Right.
girls who reported
Right.
Epstein in that case.
Right.
But again, there was only a handful of them in that first case, and only a handful in the federal cases, the federal case against Maxwell. But there are.
But there was. I just want to
Yeah.
go back a little bit, if you don't mind.
Sure.
They presented as if there was only a handful of victims, but there weren't. The Palm Beach police, which by the way deserves credit. I heard that Massey made some kind of a snarky remark about the Palm Beach police. The Palm Beach police were the heroes in this case,
Mm-hmm.
and they had 36 victims that they handed to the FBI. And not only that, but they were getting more calls from more victims after the FBI took out the case. And the FBI wasn't even, the prosecutors weren't even returning the police phone calls. The victims were calling the police saying, "What's happening here? I reported this and nobody's calling me." So there were plenty more victims coming forward. It's just that the prosecutors didn't do their job.
Right. And you've written obviously more than almost anybody about Alex Acosta, who I still think is a Rosetta Stone of this entire corrupt enterprise in some way. And you could probably explain it better than I can to folks. I get to ask that question, like, why did Alex Acosta go so easy on him? I'm like, because he had really rich friends and really rich lawyers. And I don't think Alex Acosta was up for the job.
Right.
Up
And
to the
I
job.
think he was a rising star. He didn't want to, he wanted to keep going. And you can't keep going when you're putting very wealthy, important men with connections behind bars. His goal was really to be a Supreme Court justice.
Sure.
And that's why he hired Kenneth Starr as one of his defense attorneys, because as we know, Kenneth Starr was very a powerful person in the party and also a member of the Federalist Society, which
I knew
often
Ken
has
back
a
in the
say.
day.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So I think there were a lot of reasons. I think what really needs to be looked at is whether not only Acosta, but some of his prosecutors under him, one of whom, by the way, left and opened his own law practice and then started working for Epstein. Right away, he went out one door and in the other door. He made so much money from Epstein.
Yeah.
There's a whole slew of people that allowed this to happen who I don't think were ever investigated by the DOJ.
Right. So today we obviously this bill passed. It went to the Senate. It passed instantaneously in the Senate. And it's headed to the president. by all accounts, he's going to sign it. I don't want to write anything down in stone on that because he's Donald Trump. But Pam Bondi, Kash Patel, and Todd Blanche came out and did a press conference today where I want to get your thoughts on this, where they seem to be hinting, oh, we're going to release the information that we can legally release and that protects the names of all the victims. My understanding is the victims want their names out there so they can talk about the men who abused them. Do you think this cover-up is going to be that crude on their part at the DOJ?
Well, first of all, not all the victims do want their names. There is a bunch that do not want their names out there. But here's the thing, two things. I think that they're going to try their best to scuttle the release of a lot of this material,
Sure.
number one.
Sure.
But number two, in the back of my mind, I think about Bondi's misfires with this so far. And I just know, because I know this story so well, that they're going to make mistakes. There are going to be redactions they're going to forget to make. They don't understand the gravity of some of the nuances of this case. So they'll look at some of these files and they'll think, oh, there's nothing. This doesn't mean anything.
Say more about that. I want to understand that better.
Well, I just know that like I said, there's just nuances of this case. For example, when the Oversight Committee released all of Epstein's schedules that he had been meeting with all these different people, one of the names that turned a light bulb on in my head was Matthew Menschel. Now, nobody wrote about this because probably nobody knew who Matthew Menschel was. But Matthew Menschel was one of the top prosecutors in Florida who negotiated Epstein's deal. And lo and behold, having dinners with Epstein between 2011 and 2019. I don't know about you, but I don't know very many prosecutors who work out a deal with you and then has steak dinners with you a couple of years later. So there are things like that they may not recognize a name and know its significance, or the fact that for example, one of the victims, we know there's probably a lot of victim statements in these documents. One of the victims might mention something that doesn't mean anything, but I'll look at it and I'll know exactly what it means.
Right.
It's hard to give examples of this, but just trust me, I know, because all the time I hear things or see things and I think, oh my God, I know who that is.
Right. Well, as a student of cover-ups in our history, this one is both expansive and clumsy. And when I watched today's press conference, and we're going to play that in a second here, I want to get your thoughts on it on the other side. When I watched today's press conference, I noticed Pam Bondi has a very careful set of legal words she's using about how they're going to justify the next phase of the cover-up. Let's go ahead and roll that tape. I'll get your thoughts on the other side.
New investigation by the Southern District of New York U.S. Attorney prevent the department from releasing all of the remaining files?
So we have released over 33,000 Epstein documents to the Hill, and we'll continue to follow the law and to have maximum transparency. Also, we will always encourage all victims to come forward.
What are the next steps, Madam Attorney General, for the DOJ regarding what we assume President Trump will sign into law with the Epstein files? Is this going to be on the Justice Department website? What are you doing here over the next 30 days, as we understand it?
We will continue to follow the law with maximum transparency while protecting victims.
When you say follow the law, Madam Attorney General, do you mean that you will provide all the files by 30 days?
We will follow the law. The law passed both chambers last evening. It has not yet been signed, but we will continue to follow the law, again, while protecting victims, but also providing maximum transparency.
Madam Attorney General, the DOJ statement earlier this year saying that the files would not release mentioned the fact that the review of the documents and the evidence did not suggest that any additional investigation of third parties was warranted. What changed since then that you launched this investigation?
Information that has come for information there's information new information, additional information. And again, we will continue to follow the law, to investigate any leads. If there are any victims, we encourage all victims to come forward. And we will continue to provide maximum transparency under the law.
Wedding, Madam General. On Ryan Wedding, you mentioned,
Madam Attorney General, the issue with the new information that you just indicated, is the department seeking information perhaps from the Epstein estate, because Mr. Blanche did not have that information when he interviewed Ghislaine Maxwell? What new information, and would you limit the new investigation to just those named persons that the president talked about, or is this a broad, open-ended investigation?
I would refer to the Deputy Attorney General's post that he put out on X, and we're not going to say anything else on that because now it is a pending investigation in the Southern District of New York.
You know, within the law, seems like it covers a multitude of sins in this case. Seems like, I mean, again, I've been around the block enough times to remember when Al Gore was in a fundraising scandal back in the Clinton administration, and he used the phrase, there was no controlling legal authority. And he used it in a press conference something like 20 times. And it's kind of the tell in a scandal like this, in an issue like this, they are clearly signaling that they're going to stonewall some of this. And I think, you know, they put 1,000 people on this to look through the documents for Trump's name. They're still going to screw it up. They're still going to leak. I think you're right. The thing is still going to have their vulnerabilities. And I don't think the pressure goes down anymore. I feel like the victims' families and the victims have come into their own in terms of being able to bring this story into focus better than they ever have before. But you know, what were your thoughts watching Pam Bondi? I mean, and the facial expressions and the body language of Blanche and Patel working in the background. They looked like they wanted to be anywhere else on this earth.
Yeah. Well, let's just also remind people that Pam Bondi was the Attorney General of Florida during part of this scandal.
Yep.
She was not in office when the deal was made with Epstein.
Right.
But after that deal was made, there was a lot of information that came out about the bigger scope of Epstein's crimes. And let's face it, these were girls that were from Florida. Okay.
Right.
So she never said, you know, this was a horrible Florida crime. We need to take another look at this. I'm assigning a special or whatever.
Right. It wasn't like the statute had run out.
She never did anything.
Right.
No. And even so, there's also other ways to get people that, you know, are dangerous. He was dangerous. He was a predator. And not only that, but the Palm Beach authorities weren't even monitoring him. He was a sex predator, and they weren't even monitoring what he was doing.
Right.
So, so that there's that. Beyond that, I, you know, we're just kind of to wait and see. I do think, of course, it sounded like she was basically saying, you're not going to see, you know, she's setting the stage anyway for excuses for not releasing or being, it's ironic. She says we're going to be transparent, but she's actually setting the stage for not being transparent.
Exactly. So I do think that is a shocker. The material that the Epstein family has been releasing to the House Oversight Committee and more widely than that, even, what are your thoughts on that? Because Mark Epstein seems to be a sort of unanticipated curveball in a lot of the strategy and the administration to manage this crisis.
I don't know. I can't figure that out because the estate, the people affiliated with the estate should be looked at, to be honest with you as well, because they've been with Epstein from the beginning. They were his accountants, and his business people who were helping him with his business, whatever that was. So I don't know. Perhaps they feel by giving them a lot of material, they're keeping themselves out of hot water, you know, because they're helping, you know, so they're keeping themselves from getting for being looked at. So I don't really know what their motive is And certainly I hope they're complying and providing everything and not just cherry picking things that that they want the lawmakers to see.
Yeah, Mark Epstein seems to have, he's caused a bit of a stir the last few days, releasing more of these things, contextualizing more of these things, and mentioning a couple of times now, yet Trump's in the files. Trump's in the files. We know more. I'm curious if you think that my guess is no, but I'm curious what you think. Will Bondi and the DOJ actually try to find more information from the family? Because it seems to me like they seized his houses. They seized every document, every photograph, all the videotapes, all the cameras, all the ephemera. Does the estate have something that they don't have, do you think?
Well, yeah, I think the estate has everything. Epstein probably buried things in places, who knows, safety deposit boxes that the authorities never knew about. So, yeah, they probably have everything. So, yeah, you know what? I've never had confidence that the DOJ ever did the proper investigation that they should have done,
Right.
On this case. It's a hard case, in fairness,
Sure.
because you're trying to the case that they had against Maxwell it's a miracle, I think, that they got that conviction, because we're talking about girls that were molested almost 20 years ago.
Right.
And so those memories are faded, and Maxwell's lawyers were successful at poking holes in some of their stories because their memories had faded. So these cases are hard, but here's the thing: there's corroborating evidence. Where are the financial records? He was wealthy. He got those tax breaks, by the way. Stacey Plaskett was one of the people that helped him get all those tax breaks.
Right. And less folks just think this is all about Republicans. Stacey Plaskett is by no means a Republican.
No, and I've written about her. I've raised questions about her. The first time I went to her to ask about the money that she got from him, she was the only person that didn't return the campaign contributions she received. She sort of tried to compartmentalize his crimes versus he had a business, so therefore you can't.
Right.
She was trying to
have it both ways, basically.
Yeah.
Keep
and
the money
then,
and yeah.
Right. And then the story kept building and building, and more reporters were calling her. So then the story was I donated it to women's and children charities or whatever. So when I did my last story in 2023 about the U.S. Virgin Islands, which, by the way, she wasn't the only one that was involved with helping Epstein there. She said she had donated it, and I asked for the receipts or some proof, and I never got it.
What a surprise.
Yeah. So I'm hoping people now are going to ask her again for that proof. There's just, go ahead.
No,
there's just so many people that helped him.
So I never met Epstein. I heard about him a little bit. I think you and I talked about this one time. I heard about him a little bit. I was doing a lot of business in Palm Beach, late 90s, early 2000s, with a bunch of private clients, developers and bank folks. And I heard about him, but I never met him. I never, got the vibe about directly what was like in person. Was this guy just so charismatic in some way that people just did this stuff that is so obviously amoral? I mean, what was it about this guy? What was it? Just he's a classic sociopath, or what was it that like brought these incredibly powerful people into his orbit and kept him there? Aside from the sex, because that had to be part of it, but it couldn't have been all of it.
No, it was money. It was his money. He donated to a lot, like, for example, the academics that were in his circles, Nobel Prize winners, he gave money for their research. That was, so some of it was money. In fact, the academics kind of laughed about him under their breath. They thought he was a
dilettante.
Fabulous. Yeah, but they entertained him because they wanted money from him. I think that some of these other people just saw that he could help them either, if not make money, to advance their careers. You know, from the emails we see, some of them had hoped that he would help their romance life, romantic life. So it
Man,
was
Larry Summers, what a like thing. What a like ugly note in Larry Summers.
Yeah, I knew about his association for a long time. Anybody who studied the case knew it because he was all over the plane logs all the time,
Right.
and the you know, there was a lot of material from him about him in there for a while. So you know, this doesn't show that he committed any crime or
Right.
anything, but it was too much. It's like, you know, if you're in somebody's vocabulary all the time, you have to wonder, you know, how did these men not know what Epstein was doing?
Right.
You're you know, you talk to him. I think Steve Bannon. I think we collected or counted in one day. There were like 50 emails that went back and forth between him and Epstein.
I mean,
50.
Bannon has always been this collector of powerful people. He's tried to make himself a pet of powerful people and make them his pets. And that dynamic between the two of them was so striking to me because it's, you know, here's Steve Bannon on the one hand being one of these promoters of all the conspiracy theories about child sex rings and all that. And on the other hand, even after Epstein has been sentenced and convicted and served his sentence for this stuff, Steve Bannon's just like, yeah, I'll help you out. You know, I know you got some image problems right now. Oh,
Well, it was also after my series ran when everybody knew how bad it was. So, in fact, I think with some of the emails concerned my series. I mean, you know, why aren't the Republicans asking for an investigation into Steve Bannon? I mean, he was right there with Epstein too. So I don't, you know.
I mean, and he filmed something like 27 hours of interviews with Epstein. I have to imagine that it wasn't all about Epstein's love of science. It really is striking to me that you make a very good point, Julie, that Bannon is just like he's another dog that hasn't barked. They haven't asked this guy who is in intimate, constant communication with him, not as a journalist, but as a person. He's talking about like, how do you manipulate Trump? How do you push this and that? It was a striking, you know, revelation in these documents.
Yeah.
Well, Julie, I want to thank you as always for coming on. I mean, we could probably go for hours on this, but we're up against the clock here, and I think we unfortunately will not be done with this story anytime soon, given this DOJ and given what we've got. But I do think it was a week for the victims to have a little bit of recognition for what they've been through here and a little bit of the hell they've suffered, which it doesn't make it all worth it, everybody, but it certainly, I think, helps some of them get a little bit of closure on the road here to recovery. So, Julie, thank you, my friend, as always, for coming on. I appreciate your knowledge and your wisdom on this so much, and we'll have you back again real soon.
Thank you.